I won millions in the lottery, but chose to keep it a secret. I asked my family for help as a test. Only one person actually offered to help me. I thought winning the lottery would solve all my problems. Instead, it exposed a betrayal so deep, it shattered my entire world and forced me to confront the painful truth about everyone I loved. The air in my tiny, always a little too cold Portland apartment usually hummed with the quiet anxiety of bills and deadlines. But that Tuesday, the mundane silence was obliterated by a deafening roar in my ears. My hands, trembling uncontrollably, held a piece of paper that promised an impossible escape: $47 million. I'm Abigail Davies, most people call me Abby, and I was 34 years old when those 6 numbers perfectly aligned. After the initial, earth-shattering shock faded, a strange, almost chilling thought crept into my mind. I would tell absolutely no one. You see, my family and our history with money is, let's just say, deeply complicated. Before that life-altering Tuesday, my existence was relentlessly ordinary. I was an accountant at a small marketing firm, working grueling 60-hour weeks that felt more like the rule than the exception, especially during tax season. I earned just enough to live, not thrive, always with the persistent, nagging worry of expenses looming. My one-bedroom apartment on the city's outskirts was modest, nothing fancy, but it was mine. Every morning, the ritual was the same: wake at 6 a.m., brew coffee, and face another day under the heavy cloak of financial insecurity. And my family? Oh, where do I even begin? My parents, Thomas and Sarah Davies, divorced when I was 14 and both quickly remarried. My father, Thomas, a high school physics teacher, found Stephanie, a real estate agent with champagne tastes and an even more expensive lifestyle. My mother, Sarah, married Arthur, a successful businessman who had plenty of money, but clutched every penny like it was the last. I have 2 siblings. My younger sister, Emily, 30, was always the golden child. Ivy League educated, married to a surgeon named David, living in a beautiful suburban home with their 2 seemingly perfect children. Then there's my older brother, Michael, 36. Charming, intelligent, but utterly directionless. He cycled through jobs, relationships, and had perfected the art of borrowing money from family, only to disappear until the next crisis. It was a predictable, heartbreaking pattern: desperate call, emotional plea, a solemn promise to repay, then radio silence. Even my extended family added layers to the chaos. My Aunt Eleanor, my mother's younger sister, was perhaps the only genuine soul in our entire family orbit. Despite being an elementary school teacher, living paycheck to paycheck, she always managed to show up when it truly mattered. She drove an ancient Honda that sounded like it was constantly on its last breath, lived in a small apartment overflowing with books and plants, and never once complained about her own struggles. In stark, painful contrast was my Aunt Brenda, my father's older sister. She married wealth and never, ever let anyone forget it. Holidays with her were an exercise in endurance, a gauntlet of critiques about everyone's life choices and thinly veiled insults about my career, apartment, and perpetually single status. Her son, my cousin Kevin, had inherited her entitlement but none of her financial acumen. He had a gambling problem the family conveniently pretended not to notice. My past experiences with lending family money had left me deeply jaded. 3 years ago, when Michael needed $5,000 for rehab, I emptied my modest savings to help him. Months later, I discovered he'd never actually gone. When Emily needed help with her wedding costs, I put $2,000 on my credit card, which she promised to repay after her honeymoon. 5 years later, I was still waiting. When my father needed a loan for roof repairs after a storm, I sent what I could, only to see photos of him and Stephanie vacationing in Cancun the very next month. The only person who knew the full, bitter extent of these betrayals was my best friend, Chloe. We met in college, and unlike every other relationship in my life, hers remained constant, a steadfast beacon. Chloe, a nurse, understood hardship and never judged my complicated feelings about my family. She was the voice of reason when bitterness threatened to consume me, reminding me that not everyone was out to take advantage. Work wasn't much better. My boss, Gary, had a habit of stealing my ideas during client meetings, while my colleague, Mark, consistently left early, leaving me to pick up his slack, yet somehow always ended up with the credit. Despite feeling undervalued, I kept my head down, hoping diligence would eventually pay off. Buying lottery tickets was my one small indulgence, a weekly ritual that my family loved to mock. My mother called it a tax on people who can't do math. My brother joked I should just give him the money directly. My father lectured me about probability. But there was something undeniably hopeful about those tickets, a tiny, glittering chance at freedom that I couldn't bring myself to abandon, even as years passed without winning more than $20 here and there. My dreams were simple, yet felt impossibly far away. I longed to travel, to see places beyond the familiar Pacific Northwest. I wanted to return to school, maybe pursue a master's degree in something I was genuinely passionate about. Most of all, I yearned for enough savings that an unexpected car repair wouldn't send me spiraling into a financial tailspin. But these aspirations seemed increasingly distant as I entered my mid-30s, still burdened by student loans and a persistent credit card debt that, despite meticulous budgeting, never seemed to shrink. Each month was a precarious balancing act: bills, groceries, the rare dinner out with Chloe. I clipped coupons, price-compared everything from toilet paper to coffee, and knew exactly which store offered the best deals. I drove a 10-year-old Corolla that made concerning noises in the rain, but replacing it was an unthinkable luxury. I had mastered the art of appearing perfectly fine while constantly calculating costs in my head, weighing every invitation against my dwindling budget. This was my life before everything changed. Ordinary, often difficult, occasionally lonely, but stable in its own way. I had no idea how a single piece of paper was about to completely upend everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called family. The day I bought the winning ticket? It was my 30th birthday. I'd just survived another brutal week at work where Gary had, predictably, taken credit for a financial strategy of mine that saved a major client thousands. I stopped at Frank's Corner Market, as I did every Friday, but this time, something shifted. Happy birthday, Abby. Frank, a kind older man who'd owned the store for over 30 years, greeted me. He knew all his regulars by name, always had a friendly word. Thanks, Frank. The usual, please, and maybe one extra for good luck, I replied, handing him a $20 bill instead of my usual $10. Birthday splurge. Maybe today's your lucky day, he winked, handing me the tickets. Instead of my usual quick picks, I decided on a whim to choose my own numbers. I picked my birth month and day, 3 and 16. My mother's birthday, 12. My father's birthday, 21. Eleanor's birthday, 9, and Chloe's birthday, 30. 6 numbers, representing the most important people in my life, even the ones who had disappointed me so profoundly. That evening, I ordered takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant, opened a bottle of wine Chloe had given me, and settled in for a quiet night alone. The lottery drawing was at 8 p.m., but I barely paid attention, scrolling through social media, seeing posts from acquaintances enjoying far more exciting birthday celebrations than mine. At 8:30, the tickets suddenly surfaced in my mind. Lazily, I picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting nothing as usual. The first number matched, 3, I smiled faintly. The second matched, 16. My heart rate picked up just a beat. Third number, 12. Fourth, 21. By now, my palms were sweating. Fifth number, 9. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final number, 30. I stared at my phone for what felt like an eternity. This couldn't be right. I must have read something wrong. I checked again and again. I turned on the television, rewound to the live drawing. I watched as each of my numbers appeared on the screen, one after another, in sickening succession. My hands shook so violently I dropped the remote. No way, I whispered to the empty apartment. No way. According to the lottery website, I was the sole winner of $47 million. After taxes, it would be somewhere around $28 million. An unfathomable sum for someone who, just that morning, had been excited about a 10% off coupon for laundry detergent. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I spent hours researching lottery winners online. What I found was disturbing. Stories of lives falling apart after a windfall. Families torn apart by greed. Friends and distant relatives appearing out of nowhere with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners who were bankrupt within 5 years, more miserable than before they had won. One article chillingly called the lottery the quickest path to losing everything you care about. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and orange, I made my decision. I would claim the money, but I would tell no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Chloe. At least, not right away. I needed time to process this, to make a plan, to understand what this money would truly mean for my life, before everyone else tried to tell me what to do with it. That morning, for the first time in 3 years, I called in sick to work. Then, I made an appointment with Arthur Hayes, an attorney specializing in financial planning and estate law. His office was in a sleek downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the plush waiting room in my ordinary clothes, clutching my purse with the winning ticket hidden inside, I felt like an imposter. "Miss Davies." Arthur greeted me, extending a hand. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind expensive glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and, with a surprisingly steady hand, placed the ticket on his polished desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone finding out it was me." His eyes widened briefly, a flicker of surprise as he examined the ticket. Then, he nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you've come to the right place." Over the next 2 hours, Arthur meticulously explained my options. In our state, lottery winners could claim prizes through trusts or legal entities to keep their identities private. He outlined the process of setting up a blind trust, explained how taxes would work, and stressed the importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to manage such a colossal sum. The biggest mistake winners make, he warned, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that happens, there's no going back. I nodded, a profound sense of relief washing over me. My instinct had been correct. I want to do this right. I don't want this money to ruin my life. As I left Arthur's office, a folder full of documents and a list of next steps clutched tightly in my hand, I felt a strange mix of excitement and dread. I had more money than I could ever have dreamed of. Yet, I couldn't share this life-changing news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same struggling accountant while secretly being a multimillionaire. Over the next 2 weeks, I worked tirelessly with Arthur to establish the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We meticulously crafted a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I would never have to worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was real, now securely sitting in accounts under my control. Yet, my day-to-day life remained stubbornly unchanged. I still went to work, still complained about bills with coworkers, still drove my rattling old Corolla. The secrecy, however, was starting to weigh on me, heavy and suffocating. I found myself constantly wondering about my family. Would they truly be happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries? Or would they simply see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions haunted me, burrowing into my thoughts, and gradually, an idea began to form. What if there was a way to find out how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who, if anyone, deserved to share my secret? The plan crystallized one sleepless night as I stared at the ceiling. I would create a scenario where I desperately needed financial help. Not an outrageous sum, but enough to be significant, enough to require effort from them. I would approach each family member with the exact same story, the same plea, and see who would help me, genuinely, without the prospect of gaining anything in return. Only then would I truly know who deserved a place in my new life. The next day, I met with Arthur again, just to ensure my finances were completely ironclad before I proceeded. We had established a diverse investment portfolio, set up trusts for future charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but me. "Everything is in order, Abby," Arthur assured me, sliding a folder across his polished desk. "Your financial future is secure. You could stop working tomorrow if you wanted to." The thought was incredibly tempting, a whisper of pure freedom. But I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise too many questions, questions I wasn't ready to answer. I think I'll stay at my job for now, I replied. At least until I figure some things out. That evening, I invited Chloe over for dinner. As we sat on my small balcony, glasses of wine in hand, I decided to share part of my plan with her. I couldn't keep everything bottled up, and I trusted her more than anyone in the world. I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family, I began carefully. Chloe raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in her gaze. What kind of experiment? I took a deep breath. I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help. Just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I genuinely need it. Chloe's expression shifted from curiosity to deep concern. Abby, that seems manipulative. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired, I said, not quite meeting her eyes. Tired of being the only one who helps when they need it. I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. But lying to test people? That doesn't sound like you, Chloe said, setting down her wine glass. Why not just ask them how they feel? Have an honest conversation. I laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. Right? Because my family is so great at honest conversations. You know how they are, Chloe. You've seen how they treat me. Still, this feels wrong, she insisted. What are you trying to prove? I'm not trying to prove anything, I insisted, though a part of me knew that wasn't entirely true. I just want to know who actually cares about me, versus who just sees me as a resource. Chloe shook her head slowly. I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this. But I know that look in your eye. You've already made up your mind. She was right. I had spent that day meticulously crafting my story, making sure it was believable, but not so dramatic that it would instantly raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm I worked for had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest client. I would say I needed $5,000 to cover rent and immediate medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, but not outrageous, and certainly not beyond the means of most of my family members. I made a list of everyone I would approach: my mother Sarah and stepfather Arthur, my father Thomas and stepmother Stephanie, my sister Emily and her husband David, my brother Michael, my aunt Eleanor, my aunt Brenda, and my cousin Kevin. 10 people, all of whom had turned to me for help at some point. All of whom I had supported, either financially or emotionally, when they needed it. The next day, I practiced my story with Chloe, who reluctantly agreed to help despite her misgivings. You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate, she advised. And have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions. I nodded, taking mental notes. I'll say the CEO had been embezzling funds, and the company is under investigation. That would explain why it happened so suddenly and why I might not get my final paycheck. And what about your job search? They'll ask about that. I've been applying everywhere, but the job market is tight, especially for specialized accounting positions. I have some interviews lined up, but nothing definite yet. And my emergency fund is depleted from some recent medical tests. I had thought through every single detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many red flags. As I finalized my plan, a faint twinge of guilt pricked at me. Was Chloe right? Was this manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings, stretched my budget, sacrificed my own needs to help these very same people, often at great personal cost. My resolve hardened. This wasn't just about testing them. It was about protecting myself and my future. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. My mother Sarah would probably offer some help, but less than I needed. My father Thomas would lecture me about financial responsibility, but might send a small amount. Emily would claim she couldn't help due to the kids' expenses. Michael would definitely say he had no money. Arthur and Stephanie would refuse outright. Aunt Brenda would judge me for my poor life choices. Cousin Kevin would promise help that would never materialize. The only person I held any real hope for was Aunt Eleanor. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most generous with what little she had. But even with her, I tried to keep my expectations low. $5,000 was a lot of money for a public school teacher living alone. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member individually, tell them the same story, and see who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me beyond what I could do for them. With a strange mix of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and made the first call. It was time to find out who my real family was. I decided to call my mother, Sarah, first. She had always prided herself on being a nurturing parent, frequently reminding us how she had sacrificed her own dreams to raise her children. If anyone would help, I thought, it would be her. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed. She answered on the third ring, sounding a little distracted. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice sound strained. "Abby? Is everything okay? You sound upset." I launched into my carefully prepared story. The company suddenly closing, the lost wages, my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing change, growing more concerned with each detail. "Oh, honey, that's terrible," she said when I finished. "Have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks to process and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent medical tests for concerning symptoms. I didn't specify what the symptoms were, allowing her imagination to fill in the blanks. "I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." There was a long, uncomfortable pause on the other end of the line. "Oh, Abby, you know Arthur and I just put a down payment on the lake house. We're pretty cash poor right now." Her voice took on a slightly defensive tone. "Have you asked your father? Or Emily? David makes good money at the hospital." I was hoping to avoid asking Dad, I said, truthfully. "And Emily has the kids and their private school tuition." "Well, let me talk to Arthur and see what we can do," she said finally, a note of resignation in her voice. "But I can't promise anything. You know how tight he is with money, especially when it comes to—" Yes, I knew. Arthur had never considered me his responsibility, making it clear from the beginning that his money was for my mother and any children they might have had together. They never did. "Sure, Mom. Just let me know as soon as you can. The rent's due next week." "I will, honey. And I'm so sorry about your job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign you should look at changing careers to something more stable." After hanging up, I noted her response in a journal I had started for this purpose. Concern, yes, but an immediate pivot to passing responsibility to someone else. She hadn't outright refused, but I suspected her conversation with Arthur would conveniently result in them being unable to help. The next day, I met my father, Thomas, for coffee. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. "You look tired," was his greeting as I sat down across from him. I gave him a weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain details. When I finished by asking for help with the $5,000, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. "Abigail, I have always taught you about financial responsibility," he began, slipping into his familiar teacher voice. "This is exactly why I told you to keep 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan?" "Life happened, Dad," I replied, trying and failing to keep the frustration out of my voice. "Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money." He sighed heavily. "And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your cable subscription and those streaming services?" For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. "I would love to help you, Abby, but Stephanie and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We can't afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible." He patted my hand patronizingly. "This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes." I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it still stung to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. My sister Emily was next. I drove to her beautiful suburban home on a Saturday afternoon. Her husband David was golfing, giving us privacy to talk. "Abby, what a surprise," she exclaimed when she opened the door. "The kids are at their swimming lessons. Come in." Her house was immaculate, adorned with expensive furniture and framed professional family photos on every wall. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen, sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my situation. "Oh my God, that's awful," she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. "I can't believe they would just close like that. Poor you." Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a spark of hope. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $5,000. "Oh," she said, her expression shifting slightly, her gaze flickering away from mine. "Well, this is actually not a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month and the kids' tuition was due. Plus, we're redoing the master bathroom." She glanced around nervously. "David handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget." "I understand," I said quietly, the hope deflating. "I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate." I know," she said quickly. "Let me talk to David and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount? Or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. The guest room is being used for storage right now, but we could clear it out." I thanked her for the offer, but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search centered in the city. She promised to call me after speaking with David, but the way she avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. My brother Michael was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief message. "That sucks, sis. Really tight right now myself. We'll call you later." He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered. When I tried calling him directly, the calls went straight to voicemail. This, from the same brother who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises of repayment that never materialized. My stepmother Stephanie was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pretense of sympathy. "Abigail, I'm sure this is difficult, but Arthur and I are not in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate?" When I pointed out that I had helped them with repairs to their vacation cabin just last year, she bristled. "That was different. That was a family property that you also enjoy using." The fact that I had only been invited to the cabin once in 5 years apparently did not matter. My stepfather Arthur was even worse. "You are not my daughter," he said plainly when I called. "I have supported your mother for years, but your financial problems are your own. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path." My cousin Kevin initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted an hour before, saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did, and eventually stopped responding to my messages altogether. Aunt Brenda's response was perhaps the least surprising, but still painful. "Well, Abigail, I always said that company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college, but no one listens to me." She then proceeded to recount all the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had already heard from Emily that Aunt Brenda was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. After a week of rejections, half-promises, and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my very worst fears about my family. But the reality was still a bitter pill to swallow. 7 people who had repeatedly asked for, and received, my help over the years, couldn't or wouldn't return the favor when I truly needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Eleanor. "Abby, honey, I just heard from your mother about the job. Are you okay?" Her voice was warm, thick with genuine concern. I hadn't actually reached out to Eleanor yet, planning to call her the next day. The fact that she had called me first, after hearing about my situation secondhand, spoke volumes. "I'm hanging in there," I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real, raw. "Listen, I want to help. Can we meet for lunch tomorrow?" My treat, of course. The next day, we met at a small diner near her apartment. Eleanor looked exactly as she always did, her silver-streaked hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. "I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company never deserved you anyway." As we ate, she asked thoughtful questions about my job search and offered to reach out to some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's $3,000. I know it's not the full amount you need, but it should help with the rent at least." I stared at the envelope in shock. "Eleanor, I can't take this. This is too much." "Nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else." She reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my sofa pulls out into a bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay as long as you need to." Tears welled in my eyes, and this time, they were completely, utterly genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by her selfless generosity. "Now, don't you worry about paying this back right away," she continued. "Get back on your feet first. Find a job you actually like this time. Life is too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you." As we left the diner, Eleanor hugged me again. "You're going to be okay, Abby. You're smart and capable. This is just a bump in the road." Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing $3,000, more money than I knew Eleanor could comfortably spare. The contrast between her response and the rest of my family's couldn't have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine, unconditional help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Eleanor, I did some research that left me stunned. $3,000 represented nearly all of her savings. I discovered that she had been quietly dealing with complications from type 2 diabetes. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she had been picking up extra tutoring work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Eleanor, who had so little, had given me almost everything she had, without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $8,000 on a bathroom renovation, couldn't spare $5,000 to help her daughter with rent and medical bills. The next day, I invited Eleanor to my apartment for dinner. As she settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time how tired she looked, the fine lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something," I began, setting a cup of tea in front of her. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Her expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. "What is it, honey?" "I didn't lose my job. The company is fine. I still have my position." The words tumbled out quickly. I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it. Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Are you angry with me?" I asked, suddenly afraid of losing the one genuine relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. "No, not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you needed to test people this way." She took a sip of her tea. "But I understand why you did it. Our family hasn't always been kind to you." "You were the only one who offered to help," I told her, the bitterness returning. "Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely." Eleanor sighed. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself." "What do you mean?" She set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. "My ex-husband, Daniel, did I ever tell you why we really divorced?" I shook my head. The family story had always been vague, something about growing apart. "I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died, about $50,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Daniel immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's business ventures." She smiled ruefully. "I wanted to save it for our future, maybe buy a small house eventually. We fought about it for months." "What happened?" "One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant that failed within a year." She shook her head at the memory. "When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right to it as I did, as if my name on the inheritance meant nothing." I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story, less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people see you as a resource rather than a person. And it's a painful lesson. I'm so sorry that happened to you, I said, squeezing her hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Abby. It reveals who we are, too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror. Her words resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Eleanor, there's something else I need to tell you, something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $47 million. Her eyes widened, but she remained silent, patiently waiting for me to continue. I haven't told anyone else. Not my parents, not Emily or Michael, not even Chloe. You are the first to know. Oh, Abby, she breathed. That is life-changing. I know. And that's why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me, without knowing about the money. Eleanor nodded slowly. I understand that. But what will you do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secure, and I have good financial advisors, but I don't know how to handle the family. Eleanor considered this. You know, you don't owe anyone anything, Abby. Not even me. But I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical expenses, a better apartment. Whatever you need. She smiled gently. I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my life. My apartment is small, but it's full of things I love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books. And now, this wonderful secret with my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you're secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought fresh tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing in return when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Eleanor and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip and judgment. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Heard you asked Emily for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you're playing us against each other. Another came from my father. Stephanie tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws, rather than an opportunity to show compassion. And in doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Eleanor, I met with Arthur Hayes to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had painful clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about my future with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Eleanor, I told him. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She's very proud. Arthur nodded, making notes. We can structure it as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible for someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Eleanor's situation and the many others like her. What about the rest of your family? Arthur asked cautiously. Do you plan to tell them about the winnings? I shook my head. Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles. Later that day, I called Chloe and finally told her the whole truth about the lottery win and the family experiment. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. So what now? She asked. Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drives a beat-up car? I laughed. No, but I'm not going to suddenly start buying Bentleys either. I want this money to mean something, to do good. Starting with Eleanor. She deserves it. Chloe wholeheartedly agreed. And what about everyone else? She pressed. The ones who failed your test? I'm still figuring that out. I've called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement. When Sunday arrived, I was genuinely surprised to see everyone show up at my apartment. My mother Sarah and Arthur, my father Thomas and Stephanie, Emily and David, even Michael, who had been ignoring my calls for weeks. Aunt Brenda arrived with a disapproving frown already etched on her face. Aunt Eleanor came last, giving me a secret, understanding smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying degrees of curiosity and thinly veiled judgment, I stood before them, feeling strangely, incredibly calm. Thank you all for coming, I began. I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly. My mother Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Michael suddenly became very interested in his phone. Emily and David exchanged quick glances. The truth is, I'm fine. I've found a new job with better pay and benefits. This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself executive director of my new foundation with a modest salary. I'll be transitioning to that position next month. Well, that's wonderful news, my mother said with obvious relief. We've all been so worried. I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news that required nothing from them. So why all the drama about needing money? My father asked, his tone instantly accusatory. Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up? I met his gaze steadily. The job came through recently. And when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That's what family is supposed to be for, right? An uncomfortable silence fell over the room, thick and heavy. Well, we all have our own financial commitments, Stephanie said defensively. It's not always possible to help, even when we want to. Of course, I agreed, my voice calm but firm. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Michael. Speaking of which, Michael, I noticed you never responded to my messages when I needed help. Yet, you had no problem asking me for $3,000 last Christmas for your rent. He had the grace to look genuinely embarrassed. I was going through some stuff, and I didn't have any money to give you. You didn't even call me back, I pointed out softly. That would have been free. The meeting continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were endless excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I hadn't told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself in a way I never had before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Eleanor stayed behind after everyone left, quietly helping me clean up the coffee cups and plates. You did well, she said softly. That couldn't have been easy. It was actually easier than I expected, I replied, a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them, because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. Eleanor smiled. That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next? Next, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face, we start looking at houses. For both of us. 1 year later, my life was gloriously unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching lottery numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in a quiet neighborhood, with a garden that brought me joy each morning. Just 3 blocks away was Eleanor's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the days her diabetes made walking difficult. My nonprofit organization, Second Family, had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to elderly people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was profoundly rewarding in a way my accounting career had never been, and we had already helped over 200 seniors in our city. Chloe had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise and compassionate nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted into something more distant, but also, paradoxically, more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of a closeness that had never truly existed had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy, our interactions became less painful, more manageable. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which, again, told me everything I needed to know about their true interest in my life. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Michael called asking for money for yet another new business venture, or when Emily complained about the cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time, I remembered the deafening silence when I had needed help, and the choice became crystal clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my father Thomas had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's patient assistance fund. When my cousin Kevin finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Eleanor and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. She had retired from teaching but volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, still sharing her love of books with children who needed it. "You know what still amazes me?" she said one evening as we sat on her porch watching the sunset. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away." I nodded, considering this alternate reality. The family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. "And you would never have known what was real," Eleanor added, her voice gentle. "That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom." She was right. The experiment had been agonizing, but profoundly illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who did not. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying desperately to strengthen, despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others, constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I had allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now I understood that real love, the kind Eleanor had shown me, did not keep a balance sheet. It gave freely without expectation of return, but it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and bad. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I had not anticipated was how the secret would clarify them. Instead, stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money had not changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Eleanor and Chloe, and a hard-won understanding of my own worth that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone. But so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. I had built a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. Eleanor reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. "You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned." I smiled at her, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who had shown me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the incredible journey that had brought me here. From the shock of those matching numbers to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had initially feared or even hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Eleanor smiled. That's a powerful realization. So, what happens next? Next, I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face, we start looking at houses. For both of us. That quiet conversation with Eleanor on my worn couch was the true beginning of my new life. The very next day, I contacted Arthur Hayes, my attorney, and instructed him to formalize the trust for Eleanor. I wanted it structured to provide her with a generous monthly stipend, enough to cover her increased medical costs without worry, and to allow her to live comfortably, free from financial stress. Crucially, it was designed so she wouldn't have to manage a lump sum. The consistent income would protect her from the kind of exploitation she'd experienced before, and that I'd just dodged myself. Arthur, with his kind eyes and sharp mind, understood exactly what I was aiming for. He suggested setting it up in a way that felt like an ongoing gift, a thoughtful provision rather than an overwhelming handout. Then came the house hunt. We started subtly, Eleanor and I, browsing online listings, though she had no idea the house would be hers. I knew her preferences: a single story, a small garden for her plants, a quiet neighborhood. When we found a charming craftsman bungalow, just 3 blocks from the modest, beautiful home I had just purchased for myself, it felt like fate. It had wide doorways, perfect for her walker on bad days, and a sunny kitchen where she could brew her beloved tea. Breaking the news to her, truly, was one of the most fulfilling moments of my life. I remember her face, etched first with disbelief, then with overwhelming gratitude, and finally, a quiet, profound joy. "Abby," she whispered, tears in her eyes, "you don't have to do this. I told you I don't need anything." "You don't need it, Eleanor," I corrected gently, taking her hands. "But you deserve it. You gave me so much when you had so little. This is just me finally being able to give back." It wasn't just about the money, it was about acknowledging her worth, her unwavering kindness, and the genuine love she had always extended to me, no strings attached. For someone so proud, accepting such a gift was a hurdle, but she eventually did, understanding that it came from a place of pure, reciprocal affection. Moving Eleanor into her new home was a celebration. Chloe, who by now was fully clued into my secret and my plan for Eleanor, was instrumental. She helped Eleanor pack, unpack, and even set up her new garden, laughing and sharing stories as we worked. It felt like building a nest, a safe haven for the only person in my birth family who had truly deserved one. Eleanor's health improved dramatically, a testament to the power of reduced stress and access to proper care. She retired from teaching, yes, but quickly found purpose volunteering at a literacy program, her eyes lighting up when she spoke of sharing her love for books with children who needed it. Meanwhile, my own life was transforming at an astonishing pace. Giving notice at my accounting job felt like shedding a skin. The relief was immense, the liberation palpable. The launch of Second Family, my nonprofit organization, became my new obsession. It was born directly from Eleanor's story and the chilling realization of how many other elderly people might be living alone, isolated, and in financial precarity, often estranged from or ignored by their own families. My vision was simple: to create a network of support, companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance for these forgotten seniors. It wasn't about simply writing checks, it was about fostering connection, restoring dignity, and proving that someone, somewhere, cared. Chloe, with her nursing background and boundless compassion, was a natural fit as our outreach coordinator. Her ability to connect with people, to listen to their stories, and to identify their true needs was invaluable. We made an incredible team, her practical empathy complementing my strategic vision. The initial days of Second Family were a whirlwind. We started small, just me, Chloe, and a handful of dedicated volunteers. We navigated the maze of grant applications, established a board of directors, carefully chosen individuals with integrity and a genuine passion for the cause, all screened by Arthur Hayes, and began reaching out to community centers and social services. There were challenges, of course. Bureaucracy was a constant hurdle, funding was always a worry, and some of the stories we encountered were heartbreakingly sad. But every successful intervention, every senior whose face lit up with gratitude, every new friendship forged, reaffirmed that we were doing something truly meaningful. We helped Mrs. Henderson, a feisty 80-year-old whose roof had been leaking for months, paid for a repair, and connected her with a weekly volunteer for companionship. We set up Mr. Rodriguez, a retired carpenter, with a ramp for his wheelchair after his unhelpful children ignored his pleas. We provided a monthly stipend for Ms. Lee, who was struggling to pay for her diabetes medication, just like Eleanor had been. These weren't just cases, they were individuals, each with a rich history and a profound need for connection. Their gratitude wasn't just for the money or the repairs, it was for being seen, for being heard, for being valued. This work filled a void in my heart I hadn't even realized was there, a deeper satisfaction than any accounting balance sheet could ever provide. As the months turned into a year, then two, my life outwardly stabilized into a comfortable new rhythm. I drove a reliable, new but unflashy car, lived in a beautiful home I had carefully furnished, and spent my days engaged in deeply fulfilling work. But the carefully constructed facade of my old life, the one I presented to my biological family, was constantly being tested. They started to notice. It began subtly. Michael, always the most observant when it came to potential resources, remarked on my nicer car during a rare family gathering. "Looks like that new job really paid off, huh, Abby?" he'd say, a glint in his eye. Emily, during a birthday dinner, made a pointed comment about my new decor. "Oh, this looks so designer. I thought you were just getting by after the company closed." Her tone dripped with a mixture of envy and suspicion. My mother, Sarah, would frequently call, ostensibly to check in, but inevitably weave in questions about my new apartment, my new lifestyle, and my newfound financial stability. "You seem to be doing so well, dear," she'd coo over the phone. "Arthur and I were just saying, it's wonderful you landed on your feet. We're still saving for our retirement, you know, and the lake house needs constant upkeep." The hints were becoming less subtle, more direct. Each phone call felt like navigating a minefield of expectation and barely concealed greed. My father, Thomas, and Stephanie took a different approach. When I mentioned second family, my father would launch into lengthy lectures about frivolous spending on unproven ventures and the dangers of philanthropy without proper fiscal discipline. Stephanie would chime in with snide remarks about people suddenly finding a conscience or overcompensating for past financial missteps. Their judgment, though infuriating, served as a potent reminder of why I had made my initial decision. They weren't interested in my happiness or my purpose, they were only interested in control, or what they could potentially gain. There were moments, I confess, when the temptation to reveal all was almost overwhelming. Especially when Michael, ever the opportunist, cornered me at a holiday dinner. "Abby, I've got this amazing new business venture," he began, his eyes bright with false enthusiasm. "It's a revolutionary app going to make millions. Just need a small angel investment, like $50,000, to get it off the ground." "You're doing so well now, a drop in the bucket for you, right?" My blood ran cold. $50,000. The amount he'd repeatedly tried to extract from me over the years, far exceeding anything I'd ever actually given. The brazenness of it, after his utter silence when I had supposedly been struggling, was breathtaking. I took a deep breath, picturing Eleanor, happy and healthy in her new home, thriving, because I had chosen wisely. "Michael," I said, my voice calm, but firm, "I'm not in a position to invest in personal ventures. My money, what little I have, is tied up in the nonprofit." It was a partial truth, a carefully constructed boundary. He bristled, then tried to argue, then eventually slunk away, muttering about how family should support family. It reinforced my resolve. The money hadn't changed them. It had just given them a new target. And it had given me the freedom to say no, without guilt, without consequence to my own well-being. The largest conflict, the moment my secret almost came crashing down, happened about 3 years after the win. Second family had grown significantly. We had a small office downtown, a dedicated staff, and were making a real impact. One afternoon, I was at our office, meeting with Arthur Hayes to review our quarterly investments and discuss expanding our programs. He was more than just my attorney. He had become a trusted advisor, a mentor, and a friend. We were laughing about a small bureaucratic hiccup when the door to my office opened unexpectedly. It was Emily. She stood there, frozen, her eyes wide, staring first at Arthur, then at the elegant, understated surroundings of my office, and finally, back at me with a look of utter bewilderment. "Abby? What are you doing here?" she stammered, clearly thrown off. "I was just in the building for a spa appointment, and I saw your name on the directory for Second Family, and I just thought, maybe I'd stop by." Her excuse was paper-thin. I knew she was likely scouting, trying to figure out the extent of my newfound success. "Emily," I said, forcing a calm smile, "this is my office. And this is Arthur Hayes, my attorney. Arthur, this is my sister Emily." Arthur, ever the professional, nodded politely. "A pleasure, Emily." Emily, however, was clearly not having a pleasant time. Her gaze darted around the room, taking in the framed certificates, the sophisticated but modest furniture. Your attorney? Why do you have an attorney, Abby? What kind of nonprofit has this?" Her voice grew louder, laced with suspicion. "I thought you were helping old people. This looks like serious money." My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. This was it. She was too close. One wrong word, one slip, and everything could unravel. But years of navigating my family's financial dramas had given me a new kind of steel. I locked eyes with her, projecting an aura of confidence I was only partially feeling. "Emily, Second Family is a serious organization, with serious responsibilities and serious funding. We manage millions in grants and donations to support our mission. Yes, I have an attorney, just like any CEO of a growing organization would. You saw how hard I worked as an accountant. All those long hours, the sleepless nights? I built this. I cultivated donors, I wrote grants, I worked tirelessly. This is the result of that hard work and smart financial management." It was a carefully crafted blend of truth and misdirection. The millions in grants and donations wasn't exactly a lie, thanks to my own generous seed funding. The hard work was definitely true. Arthur, catching my drift, chimed in smoothly indeed. "Abigail is a very astute and dedicated executive director. We're very proud of what she's accomplished with Second Family. It's a testament to her vision." Emily looked from Arthur to me, her jaw slightly agape. The narrative I had just spun, reinforced by Arthur's professional endorsement, seemed to temporarily short-circuit her usual envy. She couldn't immediately find a crack in my story, no obvious place to insert her suspicion. "Oh," she finally managed, her voice smaller. "Well, that's wonderful, Abby. I just didn't realize it was such a big deal. Good for you." She retreated, visibly disoriented, promising to call later. She never did, at least not to press the issue. The incident was a chilling reminder of the constant vigilance required to protect my secret. It took an emotional toll. After Emily left, I slumped into my chair, my calm facade crumbling. Arthur, sensing my distress, simply placed a hand on my shoulder. "You handled that beautifully, Abby," he said gently. "Sometimes, the truth isn't what people are ready to hear, or what they even deserve to hear." His words were a balm. It solidified my conviction. My family had shown me, repeatedly, that they saw me as a resource, not a person. To reveal the lottery win would be to open the floodgates to endless demands, resentments, and the very destruction of peace I had worked so hard to build. I wasn't being manipulative. I was protecting my sanity, my purpose, and the genuine relationships I had cultivated. Over the next few years, the distance between me and my biological family solidified into an uncomfortable but manageable reality. We still saw each other at major holidays, meticulously curated and usually brief. The gossip still circulated, but it was now about my mysterious new wealth and how I'd suddenly become so successful, always tinged with a grudging respect they couldn't quite hide, and an underlying resentment that they hadn't been able to tap into it. I continued to offer anonymous assistance when genuine need arose, often through second family's broader network or direct anonymous donations. My father's medical bills, Michael's rehab payments, even a scholarship fund established in Emily's children's names for their chosen universities, all came from me, yet remained untraceable. This quiet, anonymous giving was a different kind of fulfillment. It wasn't about seeking recognition or gratitude from them. It was about honoring the small, sometimes forgotten, parts of them that still held a faint glimmer of the family I had once longed for. My true family was now Eleanor, healthy and thriving, just 3 blocks away. It was Chloe, my steadfast friend and partner in second family, who understood the weight of my secret and the joy of our shared mission. It was the hundreds of seniors we had helped, whose lives we had touched, whose loneliness we had eased. One evening, Eleanor and I were sitting on her porch, watching another sunset paint the sky. My new house, just visible between the trees, felt like a symbol of the life I had built. "You know, Abby," she said, her voice soft, "I used to think money changed people. Made them greedy, selfish. But watching you, it's made me realize it just amplifies what's already there. And in your case, it amplified a truly good heart." I reached for her hand, my heart swelling with an emotion that was pure, uncomplicated love. "I had a good teacher," I reiterated, my voice thick with emotion. The truth was, the millions in my bank account were just numbers. The real wealth was the freedom. Freedom from financial worry, yes, but more importantly, freedom from the emotional chains of expectation and disappointment that had bound me for so long. It was the freedom to choose my own path, to define my own family, to pursue a purpose that resonated with my soul. I no longer yearned for approval from those who were incapable of giving it. I no longer measured my worth by their opinion of me. I had found peace, not in the absence of conflict, but in the clarity of my choices and the unwavering strength of my self-worth. The lottery win hadn't fixed my old family, but it had allowed me to build a new one, a second family, forged not by blood, but by love, compassion, and shared values. And in that, I found a fortune far more valuable than any jackpot. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between protecting your peace and trying to fix a relationship that seemed beyond repair? How did you navigate those difficult waters, and what did you ultimately learn about yourself and the people around you? Share your insights and experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might just change your perspective. Don't forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for listening. Take care.